Hello. I'm here today to talk to you about a part of DDD that I really enjoy, and that is modeling the domain model. I have been working with software design since the mid-90s, so that's a long time. And I have been so lucky to be on some project where we have done both DDD in combination with behavior-driven development. And it's the experience from this project that we talk about today. In this project, I have been in a solution that has really complicated calculation with a lot of business rules. And I've also been in more event-oriented solutions. And I mention this now just because you will see in my silly made-up domains that we talk about today, you will see the reflection of these two kinds of solutions. So, first of all, what is a domain model? The definition, you can choose a very concrete one, saying that a domain model is an object model of a domain that incorporates both behavior and data. It's concrete, it's kind of object-oriented, and it's down in the code. The other one is taken from Eric Evans' famous blue book, and it says a domain model is not a particular diagram, but it's the ID that the diagram should convey. And I like them both, because I think in order to shape your domain model, you need to have this ID, and you need to make it concrete enough to get all the way into the code. So, I also used to focus on some properties, as all domain models, or as all models, a domain model is an abstraction. Because a domain is like banking or a hotel business, but a domain model is a model you make yourself, and you choose what aspect should you put emphasis and focus on. And of course, it must be useful for the problem to solve, meaning that when you are shaping your domain model, you already need to know on a high level, what problem do I solve in this situation? So a domain model, the reason why you have many domain models for a domain is because you need to make the one that fits for the problem to solve. And then it isn't a domain model if you don't use the domain language. And we have heard, I guess you heard that many times today, the language is really important to make it sharp and clear, and that everybody in the project knows what, for instance, a customer is in this context. And then it should reflecting the business domain. And that is more than a language, because the concept that you get from the language, the relationship also must be correct. And you should place the behavior and the rules in the right place, so it makes sense also when you discuss it with the business. And you need to exploit it in code. If you make the domain model and you leave it after the workshop in the whiteboard, or if you have it in the documentation, but you don't actually make it the whole way into code, how should you tackling the complexity in the heart of the software? That is the title of Eric Evans' book. And it should be evolving. You should actually try to find the weak spots of your domain model and make it better and stronger every day. It's not done once, and it will be there forever. So that's what a domain model is. But where is the domain model? I already said it. It's in code, but it also should be in the documentation. And more importantly, you should try to use it actively when you discuss it internal in your team, and when you discuss you and the business. Because that is a way to see when you have weak spots and when you have misunderstanding in your model. So let's assume that you are part of a team, and this team is going to work in a business area never has worked before, the hotel business. And the silly made-up task they should do is to calculate the amount of windows cleaner. And they don't have any focus on DDD, so they started out with a rather technical model, because when they should calculate the amount of windows, they just need the list of windows. And if you see on the properties, there's a lot of good smiley faces, because it's an abstraction. The model is fit for purpose. The language is kind of okay, because they are talking about window related to hotel business, but it's not reflecting the business concepts. And then, after some days, Peter has gone and talked to the business expert, and he said, well, in this hotel we have 15 doors with glasses. We need to include that in our calculation. And when he goes back to the team, Maya, the coder, say, that's not a problem. I just put it in my Windows list, and I can have a flag. It's not a window. Problem solved, and it took me really a small amount of time. And then the next requirement came along, because the mirrors is also supposed to be cleaned. So you put it in the same list. And you got to know that, well, the glasses of the door need to have a different kind of cleaner. So the is not a window flag doesn't work anymore. So you have a is door, and you have a is mirror flag, and you are good to go again. And as you see, now the language is really a sad face, because you have mixed it up, everything. But it's still, and it's not so fit for purpose anymore either. But it's still doing pretty good until the hotel people say, and we need a calculation for each floor. And then you say, floor? Who's talking about floor? This is all about window. No, it isn't. The domain is actually hotel, and a hotel has floor, and the floor has rooms. And of course, this is a silly made-up domain. But I am working on a solution for gas traders now, and I can take an example from there. A gas trade, then you trade some gas, so you have the amount, and you have a price, and you have a seller and a buyer, and you have the product, what kind of gas you are trading, and you have some timestamp or IDs that is important, and some more information, but not much. What we get for the third-party solution we are using is 2,500 lines of JSON. And that is how it's done if you are pushing your model all the way and you put just more information there. And of course, then you get a lot of null values. It was a really good talk earlier today about this, to have the intent and to know what a null value is. And that's hard if you just expand. It's like this gravity. It seems like all new features need to be put into what we already have. And that will not work in the long run. And when I'm working with a more event-oriented solutions, it's the same. We have these discussions. If you have one event, let's see, check-in event is all the information about the customer. So why can't we reuse it when we need to have the checkout event, just to put the flag? Don't do it. Think about, is it two different events in from the business? Well, it should be two different events in your domain model. So it's the same properties. Okay, let's assume that the team just wonder, okay, this isn't working. Every new requirements get harder and harder. We need to find a way to shape a domain model, not just a technical one. And then, of course, you need to do that together with the business. I will not go into details around this, just state that is important, because you can't make up a good domain model on yourself. And you need already to get to the stage where you have different bounded contexts, so you are splitting the subdomain, because a domain model lives inside a bounded context where the language is sharp and defined. And then we can start looking into behavior-driven development, or BDD. And that's a way to write what we call feature tests. It's tests that describe different scenarios that fulfill a feature. And it has three really important parts. It's the given, and given gives the state of the solution when you start the test. That kind of setting the stage, and that is, as for other testing, it is the part that you need to mock in your solution just to have the correct starting point. And then you have the when, and the when is really important, because this isn't about just state and data. This is about behavior, behavior-driven development. It's about discussing with the business what will happen in the different situations. And then you have the then, that is the result after you have done whatever happened on the when part. I will go into more details here. But what you do is you write the test, and I really fancy, and I have seen it work in real life, to write some small tests and really start small. And then I write some code. And when you write code, of course, you get into the details. You get a lot of good feedback questions. And you go on and write more tests and more code. And then you gradually shape and reshape your domain model. And this gradual is really important. I tried to use specification by examples before, but that wasn't gradually enough, and it was hard to do. But this really gave me what I wanted, because when I have all these requirements, for instance, for the complicated calculation, I can pick one piece in a puzzle and do that and start forming the aggregates in my domain model. So what we did, we just gathered the team in a room and we said, okay, for this service, the calculated amount of windows cleaner, what is the aggregate we need to pay attention to? We didn't discuss details, we didn't discuss the detailed properties, but is Windows cleaner history something that business talk about? It was someone before today said, if you don't hear it in the conversation, you probably haven't done your aggregates right. And the same here, we just started out with defining the aggregates. And then we could start with playing around with different domain models. So this one, I just want to read it out because I want you to understand that even though this is a made-up domain, even in a real one, I would start as simple as this. The feature here is calculate amount of windows cleaner. The hotel with 1 floor and with 2 rooms is the scenario. It's like the Friends episode. The TV show, the one with Monica Chandler is getting married, but the one with Phoebe running in the park. So you just say the scenario is a bit, what is this test all about? Given a hotel with 1 floor, and that floor has 2 basic rooms, and a basic room has 1 small window. When calculating the amount of windows cleaner, a windows cleaner order has been calculated. This doesn't say how much, does it? It's no numbers here. There's no, how should I know how much soap they should buy? But it still starts to shape your domain model. And you can see the difference to the 2 windows scenario, that is the technical model. It became quite visible when you put it like this. Yeah, and here I have a problem with my slide. I see I have an old version. So the one that should be up there is the calculated amount for the real one and not the list of the windows. Sorry for that. Okay, but I just want to say, even in a small scenario like this, I can start shaping my domain model in code. I put the floor, the hotel, the room, and the relations between them, and a window with only 1 property, the type is small. And if I put small there, that's because that's how the business are talking about their windows. So start small, be concrete. And my best kind of guidance is when I do this, I think about I need enough information to put the window in the right context of the business, meaning I picked hotel, floor, room, and window. But when it comes to the details, I only pick the things that I really need in order to implement the calculation correctly, to get the test green. So in this case, it's only the type is small. And I don't put what color is it, what view has it, and all the other details. As I said in the beginning, I don't try to be realistic here. I don't try to put everything into it, because then it will be harder to work with the domain model. And the next test, I take more details. I will not read this out loud, but as you see, I put some number in it, and I start putting methods on my object in my code. And of course, then I start adding more and more, and for each test, I implement them so they are automatic. You can run them automatically, so the test becomes my safety net. Because how could I reshape my domain model, dare to do that if I don't have tests that really covers all the requirements? Okay, and if I do this for a more event-oriented system, usually our starting point is event storming. And we have the command, and we have the different events, and probably a bit more of information, like the read models and the business rules. And then I could add more tests, but the way I'm thinking is really the same as I've done for the other part when I'm focusing on the calculation. In this case, when you write this test, you should always think about it should be as readable as possible. You want people to kind of see the domain model when you read those tests and discuss them. So I've taken out something in the background here, a hotel with 1 floor and with 1 room. If I repeat that for every scenario, if it applies to every scenario, it gets harder to read. So it's just these kind of things we do in order to make it easier to get into the feature test later on to see what was actually the requirement we have, what was actually the feature we have implemented. Okay, a user check-in, a customer stay want to stay for 2 nights in a standard room, you can see here that the command, the when, what happened, is really important, as I said. But sometimes I always have only one when. I can have a lot of given, because that's setting the stage. I can have a lot of then, because that's the result. But I always have only one when. It's only one thing has happened, and I want to describe what should be the result of that. But since the command often have a lot of information, we put that in the given, just to set it up. Because, as I said, this is kind of the mock part of your test. And then new events happen. And if you're doing a pattern called event sourcing, where you actually don't save your state of your domain model, but you save just the events, we are good to go now if it comes to only getting automatically test support. But it doesn't give me the power I need in order to shape my domain model. Because an important part of my domain model is both the event, that's things that the business cares about, so that's important to know. But I also need to aggregate and with the business rules, and I want to shape them through my test. So that I do, as I show you on the last part here, that the customer has first name Per and second name Larsen. Then I know what information I put into my aggregate. So I try not to put anything into my code, and that's hard to do because it's so easy when you are coding. You want to put some more information because you know they're going there anyway at the end, but I like to try to do it gradually. I just put it when I actually had described it in a test. And that helped me when I'm going to reshape the domain model. Okay. In the given part, when you have an event-focused solution, the given is actually, in a way, just the events that already have happened. And that is often the best way to show it in the test, too. And sometimes it's really the best way to discuss it with the business, because they know these events. But if you have a lot of events, like 50 events to set your stage, to get it to the correct stage, it's better to just describe what is the state of the aggregate. And as I said, that it's also been shaped by the the then part. So it's there already, so you can use it. But you can then, so we have 2 different options when you're working here. Yeah, so this is using the definition we started with, the one with behavior data. I would say that the given and the then part is the one that actually give me the business concepts. And then, in order to get from the given to the then, that is always described with concrete scenarios that show you the business rules. That is how you put the behavior and the rules in your domain model. Because BDD is all about the what should happen. We don't say anything about how is it actually implemented in code. You don't drag in the detail of implementation. And that makes it possible to refactor your domain model in code when you want, since you have the automatically test support. However, if you learn something new, and that is something you do all the time when working with a domain, you might learn that this concept was wrong. It isn't called that, it's called something else. Or you might learn that this property doesn't belong to that concept, it belongs to another one. Then you are on the reshaping. And here also, the domain test is the feature test is really important, because it gives you a view looking from the outside and in. It's so much easier to understand where did we actually use this concept when we have this test to read, than if we should go into our code just to find out where it is used. Because in a code, you might see bits and pieces, but in a feature test, you see the business language in use in whole sentence. So then it helps us to identify where is this concept used, and it makes it easier to reshape the domain model. And I really hope that what I told you here today, that you think it's, oh, this was really basic, it's kind of nothing. Because it's not just because my made-up domain is so simple, but it's because doing BDD that's all about for me, to take these small steps and do it gradually. And then each step becomes quite easy. But I think I can promise you, you will get some challenges. For instance, some of the business concept is really hard to spot. They're kind of invisible. And maybe different users, or even one users, use the term, one day you use one word, and the other one they use another word. And if you ask him what is the difference, well, it's actually nothing, but in code you can't do it like this. And then sometimes their language is really based on a legacy solution. I've been into that one. So how the business is shaped and how they are talking about it is so dictated by the legacy solution, so you need to decide, is that really the business concept? You have to see through that. And you even could be in a situation where you started out a bit wrong, that you're splitting into different bonded contexts wasn't correct. And I've been in a situation like this, and I really struggled to understand why I had so hard time with using my domain model. And it was not until the very, very end I realized, okay, this should have been two different bonded contexts. So this is this kind of hard stuff that you will get on your way. But I think even solving those is much easier when you are working this way with doing BDD to take it a step forward and reshaping your domain model, because it's easier to spot where you went wrong. And there is one thing I want to say, because I think we don't discuss that so much in the DDD community. We make solutions and we have a domain model because we want to solve the problem here and now. But my experience, the places where I feel I have seen the true power of DDD, I used to call it, is the cases where I have a domain model and there come some new requirements from the business. And those new requirements fit so good into my domain model that it kind of blows me away sometimes. But if you take a step back, it makes sense. It's kind of common sense that if you have a model in your solution that is really technical, what is the chances for the next requirement from the business to fit into your technical model? That is much less than the chances if you get a new requirement from the business and you have a domain model that reflects that business. It's much more likely that it actually fits. So for me, making this domain model is a lot about making it fit for solving tomorrow's problem, because they are always urgent. So I hope you have seen how behavior-driven development can come to your rescue in order to shape your first domain model. And I hope if you start with that you won't stop with the first one. I did not. And I think always remember the gradually part, because you need to take the small steps. It makes it so much easier to work with. And I think for me, writing tests and writing the code, it's kind of like a dance. You write some tests, you write some code, and you go back and forth. And the perfect couple for doing this dance is BDD dancing with DDD. Domain-driven design, shaping and reshaping your domain model by using BDD. Thank you.